Okay, we are recording, and we will get started as promised. Just a couple of introductory remarks. First of all, thank you for joining us. We are recording this as well. A number of people have asked that we make this available. It will be made available probably by tomorrow on our YouTube channel, and we will send an email out so you can forward it to your friends as well. Thank you for joining us. This is a presentation brought to you by the Young Israel of Hollywood COVID Recovery Fund Committee. The committee was created in April to address the short, intermediate, and long-term impact that this COVID crisis would have on our community, primarily as a means of supporting people financially, but also to pool together resources that our community, that members of our community could use. To that end, not only did we create a fund that's raised funds and has already dispersed funds for emergency needs, but we've also compiled a database of individuals, small business owners, entrepreneurs, and professionals that have offered their time, their input, and their expertise to help people navigate whatever challenges they may have, whether in their own areas of professional life or in areas that they need some consultation in as well. Another piece of what the committee has been trying to develop and provide for our community is information. So our last webinar was information on managing the challenging financial times, whether it's in regards to credit counseling, mortgage forbearance and modification, or just in general how to address household budgeting in these challenging times for many. And that webinar is available on our YouTube channel, on our Shule YouTube channel. And the idea is to bring attention to the fact that these are challenging times. No one is alone. There are resources out there available, people willing to help, and information and resources available. And if anything that the COVID Recovery Fund is doing now, if you need to be connected with a professional, if you could use emergency assistance, please be in touch with myself or Rabbi Freiberg. It is all done in a very dignified and way where anonymity is maintained and no one else has to be aware of the request or the provision of help. Along those lines, and I really thank our presenter, Mark Trencher, for bringing this opportunity to my attention. We live at a moment of epic historical significance, and we don't really know. Right, I guess that's what happens when you live in a moment of incredible importance, that when you're living through it, you don't really know. And then in retrospect, you realize that was a tremendous rupture, whether it's war or famine or some technological development. You think about the Industrial Revolution, people living through it didn't necessarily know what was going on. And then in retrospect, they're like, wow, those were incredible times. I think that's what's happening now. And so as we live through these incredible times, I've mentioned this in the aftermath of our Seders. Many of us had Seders unlike any Seder we had before. It would behoove us to make notes, to write down, to record these moments. As normal as they may seem in the moment, they are really worthy of recording. And I think that's on an individual level, and on a communal level, the work that Mark is doing is really helpful to help us understand the moment that we're living in through this research and the surveys that he does and the compiling that data, and then developing those reports within the modern Orthodox community, and for future direction in terms of, obviously this is going to be a major impact, a rupture in what has been happening up till now. What are the steps that we need to take, communities as leaders, as communal members, as we weather this storm and the aftermath as well. So I really wish our presenter, Mark Trencher, a tremendous Yasher Koach, first of all, for doing this research, for gathering this moment. This isn't the first survey and research effort he's undertaken in the modern Orthodox community, the broader Orthodox and Jewish communities, but this is one that's really going to be important now and for the foreseeable future. Just a couple words about our presenter, Mark Trencher. He's the founder of Nishma Research, which conducts Jewish communal and organizational studies, and the goal of Nishma is to provide the Jewish community with quality, affordable, needed, independent research. And it's existed for 5 years, has conducted a number of research studies, some of which, when we are cued into them, we send out to our congregation and encourage them with the link. The Rabbinical Council of America has encouraged its rabbis and its congregations to participate in Mark's research in the past. For this survey that you're going to be presenting on as well, we sent it out in advance. So some of the research data may be from the Young Israel of Hollywood community. And Mark is a longtime resident and stalwart member of the Jewish community in West Hartford, Connecticut. We are both Connecticut Yankees, so we have that in common. And I know Mark for many years in his roles, in leadership roles that he's had at the Young Israel of West Hartford, as well as in NCSY throughout these years. I know his children through our time in NCSY. And so it's really wonderful for these worlds to collide, both personal and professional. And I thank Mark for bringing this opportunity to hear his research and his findings, both from this study and more broadly in the modern Orthodox community, his research, and sharing some of that with us this evening. Without further ado, thank you, and we look forward to hearing you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Weinstock. The only thing I would add is that I've known you, I think, for 29 years when you were an NCSYer out of New Haven, and I was the chapter advisor in West Hartford. And yes. I remember you were very good friends with my son, and your father is the only other person I ever met who, together with me, we could sing the Camp Deal song. If any of you remember Camp Deal, it was a camp in New Jersey. So send him my regards. So when we talked last week, we kind of went quickly through the research that we've done, and we ended up with the title for tonight of Modern Orthodox Strengths, Opportunities. I think I reconfigured it a little bit. Modern Orthodox Strengths, Opportunities, Challenges, and the Impact of Coronavirus. So we're going to cover a range of topics. Now, the rabbi mentioned that we've been doing research. I retired 5 years ago from my job in the business world, and I decided to conduct research in the Jewish community for a number of reasons. One, I felt it's needed. Shules and organizations are making decisions without really hearing the voice of the people. I call it independent research because the questions we ask come from the community. So when I do a survey, for example, of the broad modern Orthodox community, I gather a group of rabbis and teachers from within modern Orthodoxy, and I ask them, what are the questions you think we should ask which haven't been asked up to now? And they could be challenging questions. It could be a challenge. There could be a question like, what are the things in the community that give you a lot of joy? But what are the things in the community that cause you sadness? What are your views about the role of women within Orthodoxy? So we ask questions that come from the community, from the people, and there's a lot of interest in the research. We do quality research. When I use the adjective affordable, it basically means that most of what we do has no charge to it. Since I'm retired, this is a retirement project. And I named it Nishma Research. Nishma, as you know, means a Hebrew word. It means we listen. We listen. The Torah says Na'aseh v'nishma. The Jew said, we will do and we will obey and listen when they were given the Torah. And my view is that in today's world, the world is complicated. We have to balance the Nishma and the Na'aseh. Sometimes you need to listen and hear what's going on, hear from the people before we make decisions. So these are some of the surveys that we've done very quickly. In 2016, we did the first survey ever of people who grew up Orthodox and who left Orthodoxy across the spectrum, Hasidic, Yeshivish, Aguda, Modern Orthodox. In 2017, we did a broad survey. What we tried to do is we tried to do an Orthodox version of the Pew survey, very large sample, over 6,000, a lot of questions that we asked people about their beliefs and practices, attitudes. All of these surveys are available online, and I'll tell you where they're available. Last year, we did 2 studies. One, so modern Orthodoxy, we are embedded in secular society. We believe it's important to interact with the secular society. So the questions I asked were, and how is that working out? What are the benefits? What are the challenges? We also last year did the first study ever done. There's a lot written about Ba'alei Teshuvah, people who do not grow up Orthodox observant, and they become observant at some point, whether it's bar mitzvah or teenage years or college or later. The questions, why? What was the nature of their journey? What were the challenges when they became observant? And what are the things that they would want the from birth, the people who grew up with it, what would they want that group to know about them? This year we did 2 surveys. One, we did a political survey of American Orthodox Jews across the spectrum. And the most recent one we did was it's titled Health, Emotional, Financial, and Religious Impacts of the Coronavirus Pandemic in the Jewish Community. So we've done 6 surveys, and what I'll talk to you about tonight is a kind of an amalgamation of some of the important findings. Now, I've opened up the chat box here because it's a relatively small group. So instead of holding questions to the end, if you have a question, you can either wave to me and I'll see you, or you can just type it in the chat box and then I'll read it and I'll answer the question. So we can make this a little bit more interactive. As far as timing, I think we talked about 45 minutes total. Does that still make sense? If people get tired, let me know. Okay. So modern Orthodox strengths. So the first thing you need to know about the modern Orthodox community is that there are 15 million Jews in the world. There's about 7 million in the United States, 7 million. Out of that 7 million, 4% are modern Orthodox, 4%, 300,000. The way I like to say it is, you could take the entire modern Orthodox community, everybody you know, men, women, children, everybody in your shul and every other shul in your schools, and put them into 5 of the National Football League stadiums on a Sunday afternoon. Everybody from the entire community would fit into 5 stadiums. Of course, the stadiums are closed now, but when they open, but that gives you a sense that we're very small. The Haredi world, which is combined with the Hasidic and Yeshivish, is twice as large as the modern Orthodox. They have about 600,000. I will tell you very quickly before I move on 2 things. One, even though modern Orthodoxy is the smallest group in all of the American Jewry, I believe, and people have not disagreed with that, I believe we are the most diverse. Within our little group, we have, as you go from left to right, across the spectrum, in terms of beliefs and practices and attitudes, we are the most diverse. That presents challenges. The other thing I will share with you very quickly is the modern Orthodox community is pretty much, in terms of size, it's pretty much flat. It grows, it shrinks, it grows, it shrinks. If it's growing very slowly, 1% a year. The Haredi world, the Hasidic and Yeshivish are growing at 3 times the rate of the modern Orthodox, triple the rate. So that means that in 25 years, we will probably grow from 300,000 to 350, while the Haredi will grow from 600,000 to 1.2 million. Okay, and I can tell you, that I know that organizations like the Orthodox Union, they have a long-term study which they're exploring. What will it mean when American Orthodoxy is basically Haredi in terms of our influence in America? So I'll share that with you. So what's interesting about modern Orthodoxy, what I mentioned is that's different about us, is that we have a philosophy, a hashkafa, a worldview. It's called Torah Umada, which means we embed secular society with our religious belief. Unlike the Haredi world, which tolerates the secular society, so someone will use the internet, a filtered internet, if needed for business. They will generally stay away from popular culture, movies, and TV shows. But modern Orthodoxy believes that's part of what it is that makes us citizens of Judaism and citizens of the world. We believe in experiencing secular society, science, philosophy, and even popular culture. And that is different from the other groups. Okay, I'm going to share with you the first chart I'll share with you is this one. Let's see, share. Oop, here we go. So when we did the survey, we asked people, are you Orthodox? They said yes. And then we asked them, where are you within Orthodoxy? I'm Yeshivish. And we ended up with over 6,000 people responded. A lot of them said they're Yeshivish. Some said I'm Hasidic. Some said I'm Lubavitch, which we broke out from the Hasidic. And about almost 4,000 said I'm modern Orthodox and live in the United States. So most of the results that I'll talk to you are based on those almost 4,000. One of the questions we asked them later on in the survey was, okay, you said that we used the term modern or centrist Orthodox to avoid confusion. You said you're modern or centrist Orthodox. I'm going to give you 5 groups within modern Orthodoxy. Tell me which one of those fits you. And the 5 groups were, are you, share screen. Okay. The 5 groups were, I think you can see that, right? Can you see that on the screen?
Yes, we can see it.
So the 5 groups were, are you open Orthodox? Are you liberal modern Orthodox? Are you modern Orthodox? Are you centrist Orthodox? And the last group was, are you right-leaning centrist tending toward yeshivish? That's the wording we used. That's the only one that we really explained. The others we just said, are you modern? Are you liberal? Are you centrist? The results are kind of like a bell curve. Now, I will say this. On the left, 34% said they were left of center. 25% said they're right of center. Nobody knows what the population is like because there's no data on the population of all 300,000. If people ask me, is this representative? I would say probably it's skewed to the left. We probably got more people left of center responding to the survey than right of center. But you can see it's not that far off from a bell curve. It's not that far off from a bell curve. 93% of the people were able to respond. They were able to check one of those boxes with no further explanation. Of the other 7%, a few of them said, I don't like labels. They didn't want to respond. A few said, I'm a combination. I'm Heimish, which some people said is like yeshivish mixed with modern or Hasidic. One person said, I'm all of these, which is an interesting response. And that actually could be true. It is possible for a person in today's world, people are picking and choosing their beliefs and practices, okay? So that could be true. But I just want to point out that the fact of the matter is that if you would ask other groups within Judaism, Reform or Conservative, a question of this type, you would not get this type of wide, broad diversity. In conservative movement, you would get probably 20, 30% that said, I'm traditional. The others, a few would say I'm egalitarian, but you wouldn't get this wide bell curve. In the Reform movement, you get much more of a homogeneous response. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to understand about this community. Okay, so one of the things that's always interesting is how important is your orthodoxy to you? How important is it to you? So we were going to ask people a very complicated question about, you're a father, you're a mother, you're a teacher, you're a doctor, a lawyer, you're a citizen of the United States, you feel you're a member of the human race. Where does your Judaism fit in with all those things? Anyway, that question was far too complicated to ask. So we asked a simple question. Here's the question we asked. And think about this, on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is you don't agree at all, 10 is you fully agree. Being an Orthodox observant Jew is an important part of your life. Do you agree? 0 to 10. How important is it to you? We didn't know what people would say, but it turned out that about 3/4 of the people said, yeah, 9 or 10. Those are very high ratings. Those are very high ratings. So a few people, another 18% said important, but not so. They gave it a rating of 8 or 7. And almost 10% gave it ratings less than that. My conclusions are that for people who are modern Orthodox, regardless of where they are on the spectrum, their Judaism is an important part of their life. My other observation is that this chart doesn't show it, but the results were the same for men and for women. So you might have heard people say, oh, somebody said women are checking out. They're upset about the lack of opportunities, but at this level of how important their orthodoxy is to them, women and men have the same level of importance. My other observation is people often say to me, well, we've heard of off the derech, people leaving orthodoxy. How frequent is it? And in my view, if you answered this question with a 654 or less, what you're saying is that it's somewhere from half-hearted, your orthodoxy is somewhere from half-heartedly important to you to not very important. So somewhere in the single digits is the people that are really not connected. So what are some of the other strengths? And this is a strength. We'll start with a few of the strengths. Another strength is we ask people, what are the things that give you the most satisfaction as an Orthodox observant Jew? And interestingly enough, by a very, very wide margin, the top thing was community, sense of community, sense of belonging. Twice as many people said that as said Shabbat. More than twice as many said that. I said learning, shiurim, davening, tefillah. Some of those things you hear more of in the yeshivish and Hasidic world. But it's interesting that, so this is the strength is community, which as we're going through the period of coronavirus, we really need to think about what are the impacts of the change in the community. It's changed radically. We don't meet each other as much face to face. We meet each other virtually. Shules are trying things. Will the community survive? Will people come running back? Or will people say, you know what, I'm perfectly fine davening at home, or etc. But it's a two-edged sword. Some of these things that we conclude are strengths are also opportunities. But clearly, you can see here on the chart that by a very wide margin, sense of community is very, very important. Some of the other strengths are in terms of, well, I'll read you some of the quotes. I think community is what gives me the greatest happiness. Being around other like-minded people who share a Torah lifestyle together is where it all starts. By the way, if any of you want this is a PowerPoint. If you want it, I would be happy to send it to you. I'll tell you later how to contact me. Another question that we asked is, so this one falls in the area of both strength and opportunity. The question we asked was, do you agree that tefillah, davening, is meaningful to you? And I was talking to a rabbi at another shul, a very, very learned person who happens to be the chairman of their Torah learning committee. And he said to me, what surprised you in the survey? And I said, well, we asked people if davening was meaningful to them, and 42% said, I agree fully. And then he said 42%, he said, wow, I never imagined it would be that high. And I was going to say, in my view, tefillah is so integral. I was going to say, to me, 42% agreeing fully that davening is meaningful to them sounded low. But he said, no. He said, how many agreed somewhat? I said, another 36%. So between the agree fully and agree somewhat, 80% get value from davening. So here's your strength, the people who already agree fully. And I would love to follow up with this 36% that say, yeah, somewhat, and find out how can we make the davening more meaningful. So this is one of those areas that's both a strength and an opportunity. Another one is the area of learning. We did find that there is a lot of Torah learning by both men and women across the spectrum of Orthodoxy. A majority of men learn Torah learning at least several times a week. And a majority of women learn at least once a week or more. So there's a lot of learning going on. Interestingly, the topics they learn, Parsha, Tanakh, 70%, both men and women, Halacha, Musar, Jewish law and behavior, 50%, both men and women, Jewish issues relating to the modern world, 60%, both men and women. Where there's a difference is in Talmud, Gemara, Daf Yomi, where 40% of the men learn it and 10% of the women. Still, a fair amount of women say that they're learning Gemara, and there was, as you may know, back in January, I think there was a Siyum Tanakh where several hundred women attended. Okay, finally, another area that's both a strength and an opportunity. So the question is, what percent of American modern Orthodox Jews are Ba'alei Teshuvah? What percent of Orthodox Jews did not grow up Orthodox? Anybody want to guess? Yeah, I know my screen share ended. Yeah, I generally talk on Shabbat, and so I never use PowerPoint, and I have found that just talking conversationally is really nicer than having slides up. So I will show you slides occasionally. And I'll show you this one.
A third of them. A third.
Even more. So the answer was, so I found 42%, which I thought 42%, that sounds pretty high. I went back to the Pew survey and Pew found 40% because they asked the same question. And the most recent survey I did last year about the challenges of of secular society was also 40%. So really a significant percentage of today's Baalei Tshuva, of today's modern Orthodox Jews are Baalei Tshuva. So I was in Israel to visit, my wife and I went to visit our number 2 granddaughter who was learning, and we davened at the Kotel on Friday night, where, you know, it's a madhouse, a lot of minyanim. We had our own little minyan of about 12 people. I and the person I was with were the only ones that didn't have kind of a nice black hat or a strimal on. The other 10 looked very, very, very pious, very frum. Every single one of them was a Baal Tshuva, every single one of them, including Rabbi David Aaron. Did you know Rabbi Aaron?
Sure, Israelite.
He was there. We went to his program at Israelite, but he said, yeah, he said there's just a lot of Baalei Tshuva. I'll show you this slide, which is also kind of interesting, because one of the questions that we asked in our survey was, why did you become Orthodox? This is a question that we always ask people who become Orthodox because we find it to be interesting. But you can see that the reasons were, the top 2 reasons were, I was intellectually attracted to Orthodoxy, or I was curious. Most of these people grew up as conservative, the largest percentage, and they were kind of aware that there's Orthodoxy. They might have thought of it as being exotic and different. But that, and the number 2 reason, they eventually came to believe that it's more authentic than what they were. It's like authentic Judaism, which, by the way, explains why a lot of these people, if they become modern Orthodox, they often end up becoming neo-Hasidic, or yeshivish, because they're attracted to something that they view as authentic. And in their minds, the Hasidic, even though Hasidism is only 300-something years old, but they view it as a more authentic expression of Judaism. So this is interesting, the intellectual attraction. Before we go on to the next slide,
it's interesting that the social aspect isn't one of the reasons that brought them there, even though it's one of the things that likes too much of it.
Yeah. When we did the survey of people who left Orthodoxy, we asked them a question. Why did you change your beliefs and practices and leave your Orthodox community that you grew up in? We didn't ask them why they went off the derech. We didn't use any triggering language, but we gave them a box that they could type in whatever they want. We had 600 very long answers. And the number 1 thing people mentioned most often was exactly the number 1 reason that people are attracted to Orthodoxy. They're intellectually attracted. That was the same reason that ended up at the top of the list why people left. Meaning, I had questions, intellectual questions, doubts, and I couldn't ask questions, and I had nobody. And if I asked a question, I didn't get an answer. So it's interesting that the people who are intellectually engaged are both becoming more attached to the community. But if that intellectual engagement is not met, or if it's turned off, then they leave. So I thought that was kind of an interesting observation. Before I go on to what I call the challenges, I'll just, one of the things I said, thank you so much for having me speak. I've spoken in about 35 shuls. One of the talks I give sometimes is entitled, Can We Handle the Truth? And it's a challenge. I think clearly some shuls and some rabbis are very, very open to hearing what the community has to say. So I appreciate having the opportunity to share this with you. Okay, so let me just, so I wanted to meld to some extent I've melded the information we learned from the coronavirus survey into what I'm going to talk about. But I just wanted to very quickly tell you about that survey, which is also available online. I'll give you some of the results. I'll give you some of the summary results. But what we covered in that survey, which was just done 2 months ago, is we asked people, are they aware of it? Have they experienced it? Are they concerned? What kind of risk factors do they have? Are they being careful? Are they washing their hands? Are they wearing face masks? Are they socially distancing? Do you feel isolated? Remember, sense of community is very important. Do people feel isolated? Yes, a lot of people feel very isolated. It's definitely going to be a challenge. We asked about the financial impact, which your rabbi spoke about. We asked a whole series of questions, and we measured the financial impact for all different groups. Oh, by the way, this survey covered modern Orthodox and the Haredi, which is the Yeshivish and Hasidic, and non-Orthodox. Then we asked them, are you satisfied with what your shul is doing, with what your local town is doing, with what your state, the federal government? Then we asked a few questions about the shul. What's your shul offering in davening, virtual davening, in learning? What are they offering? Are they calling? Are they making phone calls? Are they reaching out to people? Are they helping with shopping? Has your perception of the value of being a shul member changed as a result of this? That's a question that my rabbi suggested we add, Rabbi Brander from originally from Boca. And then we asked the question. The Pew survey said that Jews they asked the question about faith, about the impact on their faith, and they said the Jewish people said the coronavirus had a negative impact on faith. And then the comment was made that we don't really talk about faith. It's not a word we use in terms of we asked the question, how has this affected you Jewishly? And we got hundreds and hundreds of responses. Finally, we asked about their children's education, reactions to that. We did get 29 rabbis responded to the survey, and we asked them, what have you learned as a rabbi? I can send you those results, Rabbi. They're all in the report. And finally, we asked about political views and have their political views changed. Just a couple of quick results from this section. Feelings of isolation. So about 20% across the Jewish community feel isolated to a great extent. That's true of Orthodox and non-Orthodox. And about 2/3 do feel some isolation. It's clearly a problem. It's clearly a problem. In terms of the ability to pay for necessary expenses, about 1 out of 8 modern Orthodox, 1 out of 7 families have found it either harder to pay or they just can't pay the bills. 1 out of 6 or 7. Among the Haredi, it's 1 out of 4 have had this difficulty. We asked about interestingly, we asked people, has this affected you Jewishly? And so one of the interesting findings was the group that most often said, yes, it's made me stronger. I'm a starker yid, I use the term starker yid because I'm kind of highlighting the fact that it was the Haredi Jews who said that. For some reason, it strengthened their connection. Maybe it's brought them together. They've gone through more tragedy and more suffering. So you could kind of understand that. There's kind of a bittersweet element to it, but you could understand them saying, yeah, it strengthened me, we're together, we're in this together. Remember, they're coming from a position largely of great faith, emunah. But also among the modern Orthodox and non-Orthodox, a vast majority said really no change or it's strengthened. So it really hasn't affected how people relate to their shuls. Modern Orthodox, a majority of shuls offer online davening. Among them, a majority of members have participated in the davening. Almost every shul offers online learning. Most members have participated. So the shuls are being very much involved in the community. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to go through some of the other issues. Some of the I call these weaknesses. Cohesiveness. The community is fragmented. And there's 2 questions I would point to. One question is, do you think women should have opportunities for expanded roles in the clergy? We also asked about expanded roles in Torah learning. Everyone agrees. In leadership of organizations, everyone agrees. In being teachers, everyone agrees. In positions in their shul clergy, most people do not agree, but many do. In fact, when we ask the question, should women have the opportunity to have a position in your shul, in the clergy, with some type of title, so you know what they're doing, 19% strongly supported, 19%. So if somebody says, how many Orthodox Jews think there should be women rabbis, and I'm placing women rabbis very much in quotes, because we don't use that term, but it means a woman in that role with a title, it's 19% supported. But 19% is not 2%. And what's interesting is as you go from the left of modern Orthodoxy, it's 60%. And as you go to the right of modern Orthodoxy, it's 4%. So that's where the fragmentation is. Another question that we found a little bit of fragmentation is, would you support LGBTQ lay people as members of your shul? Interestingly enough, across all of Orthodoxy, modern Orthodoxy, a majority said, yes, I support it. Even among the most right-leaning group, the people that said, I am right-leaning Orthodox, tending toward yeshivish, 25% supported it, which is interesting. I point to this as an example of how secular society is permeating modern Orthodoxy. Remember, we're embedded with secular society. Can we stay at a distance from their views? This is the issue that has been the most issue that's had the greatest movement in societal attitudes for a large part of society. And apparently that's true for us as well. Day schools, we presented a list of 27 items and said, is this a big problem for the Jewish community? And the one that came at number one was the cost of Jewish schooling. 97% said it's a problem. 89% said it's a serious problem. It's a very big problem. So as far as a challenge, this is obviously a challenge. People are thinking of what to do. On the other hand, sometimes we learn from difficult situations. So we've had the coronavirus, right? What have we learned? We've learned that I've learned that that two of my youngest grandchildren pretty much didn't get anything out of it because they're too young. But you know, the ones who are in third, fourth grade, they're beginning to be at the age where there might be some value in methodologies that cost less. Although clearly being in school physically is what we want. But this is clearly a problem. The other thing I would say about cost of Jewish schooling is it ended up number one for every group: men, women, those with children, those without children. Said it's a big problem at all ages. Even people over age 75 said it's a big problem. So this is something we need to deal with. Some of the other things that are challenges, it was really interesting that the plight of agunot, and these are women who are unable to get remarried because they have not been able to get a get, a Jewish religious divorce, even though far fewer people personally experience that than the cost of Jewish school. It ended up number two out of 27 items. And I think the reason is that it's just really, first of all, it's heartbreaking. So you have the emotional, it's emotional, not just financial, it's emotional. And if you know somebody who's been through this, you know the emotions. And also, I think more than that, it's kind of viewed as just, why can't we fix this? It's kind of viewed as frustrating and embarrassment. But to me, it was very interesting. This ended up number two. I talk about other challenges. So number three on the list was people with inappropriate midot, inappropriate behaviors. Number five was people dishonest in business. Number seven was lack of love for others in the community. So as you say, oy vey, you know, people, I think this is clearly is an opportunity, and perhaps the experiences of the coronavirus are a moment. The people have written that opportunities like this are times for introspection, but enough people think we need to work on ourselves to make it something something worthy of addressing. Down on the list is the shidduch process is another challenge, shidduchim, and that the whole. It's been said that that going through the shidduch process of finding a spouse for your child is one of the most grueling things you'll go through. Okay, we talked about isolation as being high up on the list. So this is from the survey that we did. So among all modern Orthodox, this is from the survey I just pointed out. We asked people, is isolation and loneliness a problem? And 36% said yes, it's a serious problem. It has been said that women feel isolation more than men. That's true. It's been said that single women over the age of whatever it is, 30, feel isolation more than other groups. That is true. It's also been said that younger people in today's society feel more isolated than older people. And that is true. You can see that sense of isolation is highest among the young, and it's actually lowest among the elderly. This is an issue facing young people, even though we have social media and all that stuff, but they're feeling loneliness, and there's been changes in society. So these are issues. One person wrote, as a 50-year-old never married woman, I do not feel welcome or accepted as a full member within the Orthodox community. While it has not lessened my personal observance, it has isolated me from the spirit of the community I grew up in. Okay. I've only got, I believe I only have two more. I believe I only have three more slides. It's 9:15. Okay, I'm going to I'm going to look at the chat box for a moment. Nope, nobody. Okay. Okay. So just very quickly, since we're talking about challenges, one of the challenges is clearly attrition, people leaving Orthodoxy, what they call off the derech, having gone off the path. It's speculative as to how many people actually are in this group. It's never really been measured. No data exists, but we found 9% of modern Orthodox are kind of so-so or weak in the value of their Orthodoxy to them. So I could say 10%. Somebody posted an online survey on Facebook. If you graduated from an Orthodox Jewish high school between 10 and 15 years ago, what percent of your classmates do you think are still observant? Are observant? So this is highly speculative because who knows? We don't know who answered, and how do you know what percent of your classmates are Orthodox? But if you look at the numbers, most of them said that about 70% to 80% are still Orthodox, which means 20 to 30% are not. I've had people come over to me and say, I graduated in a class of 16 and only 2 of us are still from. So we don't know the extent of the problem, but it is a problem. And as I mentioned before, the other thing I mentioned is that this talks about people moving to the left and becoming not Orthodox. But at the same time, there are many people within Orthodoxy who are moving to the right. We asked people, have you become more or less observant in the last 10 years? And many more people said I've become more observant than less. The implications are that, remember that bell curve? That big tent is spreading. People are moving to the right and to the left. The big tent is spreading. So that raises the question of how long we can stay a cohesive group when some people are becoming more observant, some becoming less. This is the chart I referred to before about the reasons people gave for leaving Orthodoxy. The number one reason overall was conflicting learnings, intellectual thought. They heard things that they couldn't reconcile with. They heard things in the secular world. Somebody mentioned biblical criticism or evolution or science, whatever it is, and then they asked the question of the Rebbe, and they were not happy with the answer, so etc. So the role and status of women is only an issue among modern Orthodox women who leave Orthodoxy. It's not an issue among men or among the Haredi groups. Okay, so okay, so the last chart, very quickly, we asked in our survey last year, since we interact with secular society, would you say, have you had any positive interactions? You're modern Orthodox, you work in the real world, you interact with people who are not Jewish or with people who are not observant, much more than the Haredi do. Have you had positive interactions as a result of that? And more than half said, yes, I often have positive interactions. My interacting with secular society is a net positive. Interestingly enough, the thing that they say most often is, it gives me an opportunity to show the world what it's like to be an Orthodox observant Jew, and I get value from that. At the same time, we ask people, have you had conflict? So now you're working for a bank, for an insurance company, or you have social interactions. Your boss invited you to a dinner at his house. Yes, people said I've had challenges, but a majority said I either stand firm in my religious belief, or I lean towards it. I compromise a little bit. So people are figuring out how to deal with it. All of this information is in 6 studies. They're all available online. I apologize for having gone so quickly, but there's a lot to cover. I wanted really to give you a flavor for it, because I want to point out my website and mention again that all of these reports are downloadable, no charge. You can download them. The reports all have a full version, which is anywhere between 70 and 100 pages, but they all have a short version that's only 6 or 8 pages. So I encourage you to download and read if they interest you. There are a lot of articles online, newspaper articles about these. And you can email me if you have any questions. I respond to every email. I will give you my pledge. I will respond to if you want to email me. That's my email address. If you go to my website, which is easy to remember, it's nishmaresearch.com. There's also a screen that's labeled "Contact Me." You can click on it and send me an email. And to that, in a nutshell, is kind of a high-level view of probably a half a dozen of the main strengths and maybe 8 or 10 of the challenges. A lot of these things are both. A lot of these things are both strengths and challenges. Let's see. Which issues that you have identified might be addressed differently after COVID? Well, shules. So shules, people used to attend lectures in their shul, and now people are saying, "Oh, I really love the program that some other shul." People are spreading their wings and experiencing other shuls. So I think once you go virtual, a shul recognizes that if they do things right, they can attract a larger number of people to their products. Also, in terms of davening, what needs to be addressed is the reality that there are people that are already coming back, and there are going to be people who may not be that eager to come back, not for age or illness reasons, but there may be people who've gotten used to a different way to express their personal religiosity, and maybe they'll come to shul once a month and daven at home. I'm just mentioning that schools will have to identify issues after COVID. I think we talked about isolation. I think this is always an issue, and after COVID, we really need to figure out ways to keep connected to people. So there's just a lot of, people talk about the new world after post-COVID. So there's no doubt that we really have no idea yet of the extent of the changes that will be possible.
I had a question, Mark, about the off the derech phenomenon within the Haredi and yeshivish world. I know that I saw Allison Joseph has this idea that some of those people may be interested in a modern Orthodox lifestyle. Has any of your research shown that maybe some of the people that are leaving right-wing Orthodoxy might find a home in modern Orthodoxy?
Okay, so Allison Joseph runs an organization called Jew in the City, also known as Project Makom, M-A-K-O-M. Makom means place. She feels that, okay, so the Haredi world, being a Satmar Chassid is not for you. I can understand that, but why become totally secular and atheistic? Why not check out modern Orthodoxy? So her goal is to share with people the beauty of Orthodoxy, specifically modern Orthodoxy, and she's had some success. I will say that two things. One, I'll say that the membership of Project Makom is smaller than the membership of Footsteps, which is the organization that deals primarily with the Hasidic people. The problem is the problem is very simple. The people who leave the Hasidic world have really been traumatized, and their mindset is they want to get out. So some of them are willing to end up in the modern Orthodox world, but I think more of them are they're just triggered, and they're unhappy and traumatized, and they want to leave, and they have bad relationships with their families. And so she has some success. In the survey we did, it's a hard question to answer statistically, because the vast majority of people in our Off the Derech survey, when we asked them, how do you identify today? A few of them said modern Orthodox. But in the American world, people say I'm Orthodox, conservative, reform, renewal, reconstruction. If you ask the Orthodox people, what are you? They say, I'm just Jewish. I'm just Jewish. Or they'll say, I'm traditional. They might say, I'm a secular Jew. But very few of them say Orthodox, conservative, reform. They're post-denominational, which means they've kind of re-identified themselves. And the Off the Derech world has, maybe it has its own categories, I don't know. But so you're right. people do. The one thing we need to realize about American Judaism is there's a huge amount of flux and transition. People going left, going right, people becoming, people taking on Sephardic customs, people taking on Hasidic customs, modern Orthodox kids becoming yeshivish, which is, they call it flipping out. People are just moving. We're in an open society, and people are picking and choosing the Judaism they want. And to some extent, they're mixing and matching. So it's interesting and it's challenging. I'm sure for you, Rabbi, it's a typical rabbi deals with people with a huge range of people in terms of ideas and practices and beliefs.
Sure. Well, we at the Young Israel of Hollywood like to pride ourselves in our big tent, and you're just showing us that tent is continuing that tent of modern Orthodoxy seems to continue to grow along, as
it's a big tent. Yeah, the analogy I use is if some of you may remember silly putty, it's a big tent, and if you pull it slowly, it stretches, but if you pull it hard, it breaks.
Right.
Say, Gabe, were you in West Hartford? I recognize you. You were in my Shule. Gabe was at the Young Israel of West Hartford until, 6 years ago? Something like that? Okay, nice to see you.
You too.
Okay.
Okay. If I would open it up. Please feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions for Mark, or now that his presentation is over. But you're welcome to ask any other questions based on the research that he's presented or any other issues you might have. But let me take this opportunity to thank Mark for your time and for your website. I look forward to. Every time you release your surveys results, it certainly makes it into the news. Like you said, there was a number of articles, whether it's on JTA or the Forward or the Jewish Week, that speak about the results, and then the analysis, which is always fun, depending on where you come from, how you interpret the data. But I look forward to going back and reading definitely the short synopsis of your surveys, and also seeing the data myself. So thank you for that, and you should continue to help us navigate the diverse world of the Jewish community here in America with your survey and data points. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Yeah, feel free to email me. I always respond. Thank you.
Oh, I see Shelley has a question.
Oh, Shelley, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, Shelley Tuckman here. I have a question about how you determine the number of 350,000
Say it again. I can't hear you.
How did you determine? You said there was about 350,000 modern Orthodox.
300,000? Okay.
350,000, right?
Okay, 300,000.
350.
It's about 300,000 modern Orthodox.
Okay, so does that men, did you count men, women, and children over bar mitzvah, or how did you arrive at that number?
Right.
Okay, so there's a book called the American Jewish Yearbook. It's produced by two professors, one from Florida, one from Connecticut. It's an annual book, and it includes, every year it includes a Jewish census by state and city. Some of the data is fresh, some of it is a few years old. So Jews love numbers, and there are many Jewish professors in the field of demography, which is studies of populations. So that 300,000 was, and if you look in my report that I did last year on the future of modern Orthodoxy, there's actually a footnote on that chart. That's a pretty long footnote that describes where it comes from. Yeah, it includes men, women, and children, and it's an estimate because we don't know the number, but it's an estimate. And the estimate is 300,000 modern Orthodox and about 550,000 Hasidic and Yeshivish. And they live in different places. They live in certain specific locations.
This is U.S.
U.S., yes, that's U.S. Yeah, I mean, there are people who are identified as modern Orthodox, in Israel. They don't call them. They call themselves. They have a different label. But we did get a couple of hundred responses from Israel, and they checked off my. The categories resonated with them as well. But yeah, our study is U.S.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, we're going to upload this onto our YouTube channel and also make it available by a link through email to our membership. And we thank Mark. Thank you so much for the last slide with your contact information. So even those who didn't have a chance to watch it live will be able to ask any questions that they may have. Wishing everyone a wonderful evening, and everyone should stay safe and be well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. You too, Rabbi. Take care.
Be well.
All the best. Thanks for joining us.